The diplomatic conference room aboard the Meridian had seen its share of tense negotiations, but nothing quite like this. I'd been staring at the same holographic star charts for 3 hours, trying to make sense of the Zephyrian territorial disputes, when Lieutenant Torres burst through the doors with the kind of expression that usually preceded very bad news. "Captain Ryder, we're receiving a priority distress signal from the Zephyrian flagship Astrolux," she reported, slightly out of breath. "Their quantum drive has failed, and they're drifting toward the Xerian black hole." I looked up from the charts, my brain taking a moment to switch from diplomatic protocol to crisis management. "The flagship? That's Queen Valeria's personal vessel, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. And according to the transmission, she's—" Torres paused, clearly searching for the right words. "Well, she's not taking the situation well." That was putting it mildly, as I discovered 20 minutes later when we docked with the Astrolux. The moment our airlock connected, we could hear her voice echoing through the corridors, a sound like musical thunder that somehow managed to be both beautiful and absolutely terrifying. The few Zephyrian crew members we encountered were pressed against the walls with expressions of barely contained panic. "Is she always like this?" I asked Commander Thane, the ship's second officer, who was leading us toward the bridge with the determined stride of someone walking to their own execution. "Queen Valeria has strong opinions about technical failures," he replied diplomatically. "Especially when they threaten the safety of her people." The understatement of the century became apparent when we reached the bridge. Queen Valeria stood in the center of the command deck like a force of nature given humanoid form, her crystalline blue skin shifting between deep sapphire and midnight indigo as her emotions fluctuated. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, nearly 7 feet tall, with an otherworldly beauty that made it impossible to look away even as every instinct screamed that this was not someone you wanted to anger. Her pointed ears, currently flattened against her skull in fury, twitched as she delivered what sounded like a comprehensive lecture on the inadequacies of her engineering staff. The melodic quality of the Zephyrian language made even her anger sound like an aggressive symphony, though the occasional word in broken Standard Galactic left no doubt about her feelings regarding the current situation. "Incompetent star spawn," she declared, switching languages mid-sentence. 40 years of service, and you cannot maintain simple quantum harmonics. My grandmother's apprentice cook could repair this with decorative crystals and fermented fruit juice. Chief Engineer Voss, a sturdy Zephyrian with scales that had gone pale with stress, stammered something in their native tongue that only seemed to fuel her rage further. The lights flickered ominously as her emotional state affected the ship's bioresponsive systems. "Captain," Torres whispered beside me, "should we announce our presence?" Before I could answer, Queen Valeria's burning gaze swept across the bridge and locked onto our group. Her tirade halted mid-word, though I could practically see the effort it took for her to switch gears from berating her crew to acknowledging foreign dignitaries. "Humans," she said, the word carrying about as much warmth as vacuum-frozen hydrogen. "How wonderfully predictable. The moment our technology fails, the soft-skinned problem-solvers arrive to demonstrate their superiority." "Your Majesty," I said, stepping forward with what I hoped was appropriate diplomatic deference, "we received your distress signal and came to offer assistance. Our ships have compatible power coupling systems that might what?" she interrupted, her skin shifting to a deeper shade of indigo. "Provide your primitive solutions to our advanced problems. Perhaps you think your simple fusion reactors can substitute for quantum harmonics that your species hasn't even theorized yet." I could feel my diplomatic training warring with my natural inclination to point out that primitive or not, our simple technology wasn't currently drifting toward a black hole. "We're not claiming technological superiority, Your Majesty. We're offering help because that's what allies do." Her laugh was like crystal chimes in a thunderstorm. "Allies? Yes, of course. And what will this help cost us? What concessions will you demand for your charitable assistance?" Behind her, the engineering crew continued their frantic efforts to repair whatever had failed, their movements made clumsy by the presence of their furious queen. I watched Chief Voss attempt to explain something technical, only to be cut off by another wave of royal displeasure. 47 years of service, she repeated, her voice rising again, and this is how you repay my trust. By allowing critical systems to fail during a diplomatic mission. Do you have any idea what this makes us look like to our allies? The irony wasn't lost on me that she was currently making them look like a species ruled by someone with serious anger management issues, but I kept that observation to myself. Instead, I found myself studying her more carefully, trying to understand what was driving such intense fury. Despite her intimidating presence and volcanic temper, there was something almost desperate in her anger. The way she kept glancing at the tactical displays showing their deteriorating orbit, the slight tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking, she wasn't just angry about the technical failure. She was terrified. Your Majesty, I tried again, if you'll allow us to examine your quantum harmonics array, we might be able to suggest a temporary solution using hybrid technology. Hybrid technology, she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. Because naturally, the solution to advanced Zephyrian engineering is to contaminate it with human mediocrity. Torres stepped forward, clearly struggling to maintain diplomatic composure. With respect, Your Majesty, our mediocre technology is currently functional, while yours is about to become very intimate with a gravitational singularity. The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees as Queen Valeria's attention focused on my lieutenant with laser intensity. Her skin had gone completely opaque now, a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Did you just, she said with deadly quiet, suggest that human technology is superior to Zephyrian engineering? I stepped quickly between them before Torres could dig our diplomatic grave any deeper. What my officer means is that sometimes a fresh perspective can identify solutions that familiarity might miss. Two different approaches working together often achieve more than either could alone. Queen Valeria stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority and barely contained volcanic fury. You have exactly 10 minutes to explain how your fresh perspective can save my ship and my crew. After that, you can drift toward the black hole with us and contemplate the superiority of your diplomatic optimism. I looked around the bridge at the terrified crew, the failing systems, and the magnificent, furious queen who was trying to hold everything together through sheer force of will and royal rage. 10 minutes to prevent a disaster and possibly avoid starting an interstellar incident. Challenge accepted, Your Majesty, I said, pulling out my technical scanner. But I should warn you, I work better when people aren't shouting. Her eyes widened slightly, as if no one had ever made such a request before. For just a moment, I thought I saw something flicker across her face, surprise, maybe even amusement. Then she resumed her tirade, and I got to work. The quantum harmonics array turned out to be a masterpiece of Zephyrian engineering that had apparently decided to express its artistic temperament by failing in 17 different ways simultaneously. Chief Engineer Voss explained the situation in increasingly desperate terms while Queen Valeria provided running commentary on his competence, his ancestry, and his apparent inability to maintain technology that her people had perfected before humans discovered fire. The cascade failure began in the tertiary resonance chamber, Voss was saying, his scales now pale enough to be nearly transparent. When we attempted to compensate by routing power through the secondary manifolds, the quantum substrate became unstable, and you created a feedback loop that contaminated the entire harmonic matrix, Queen Valeria finished, her voice rising to levels that made nearby crew members flinch. A mistake that any first-year academy student would know to avoid. I studied the diagnostic readouts, trying to make sense of technology that operated on principles my species was still trying to understand. The Zephyrian quantum drive worked by creating controlled spacetime distortions, essentially convincing the universe that the ship was somewhere else without the inconvenience of actually traveling the distance. It was elegant, efficient, and currently about as functional as a chocolate fusion reactor. The primary issue seems to be harmonic interference, I said, tracing the energy flow patterns on my scanner. Your quantum substrate is trying to resonate at 3 different frequencies simultaneously. Queen Valeria whirled around to face me, her crystalline skin shifting through shades of indigo like an angry aurora. And I suppose you have a solution for harmonic interference in quantum substrates? Some primitive human technique that our centuries of research never considered? Actually, yes, I said, ignoring the dangerous edge in her voice. But you're not going to like it. Her eyes narrowed to burning slits. Explain. The interference is being caused by emotional resonance from bioresponsive systems, I continued, gesturing toward the diagnostic displays that were still fluctuating in sync with her mood. Your ship responds to the emotional state of its crew, particularly someone with strong psychic presence. Like a queen who's been broadcasting fury at maximum intensity for the past hour. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the hum of life support systems 3 decks away. Every eye on the bridge was fixed on me with the kind of attention usually reserved for watching someone juggle live plasma grenades. Are you, Queen Valeria said with deadly precision, suggesting that this crisis is my fault? I'm suggesting that your ship is responding to your emotional state by trying to match your energy patterns, I replied, somehow managing to keep my voice steady. The quantum substrate can't maintain stable resonance when it's receiving conflicting inputs from the bioneural interface. Her skin had gone completely opaque now, so dark it seemed to create shadows around her. So your solution is for me to simply calm down while my ship drifts toward destruction? My solution is for us to work together to create a stable resonance pattern that your ship can lock onto, I explained. Human neural patterns aren't compatible with Zephyrian bioresponsive systems, which means I can provide a neutral baseline while you regulate your emotional output. Chief Engineer Voss looked like he wanted to crawl into the nearest maintenance shaft and hide until the shouting was over. Your Majesty, the human's analysis does match our internal diagnostics. The quantum substrate has been fluctuating in direct correlation with bridge biosignatures. So not only is this disaster my fault, Queen Valeria said, her voice climbing toward volcanic levels again, but the solution requires me to suppress my perfectly reasonable anger while trusting human technology to save my people. The solution requires you to channel your anger constructively instead of letting it feedback through your ship's systems, I corrected. And yes, it requires trusting me. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through disbelief, fury, and something that might have been calculation. Around us, the bridge crew held their collective breath while waiting to see if their queen would accept help from a human or let pride send them all into a black hole. You have exceptional audacity for someone whose species only recently discovered interstellar travel, she said finally. Very well. What do you need? Access to your bioneural interface and permission to integrate human technology with your quantum systems, I replied. Also, you're going to have to stop shouting at people for about 20 minutes. Her laugh was sharp enough to cut crystal. Stop shouting? Do you have any idea how difficult it is to maintain authority among a crew that already questions every decision I make? How can I lead if I cannot express displeasure with incompetence? Maybe try expressing confidence in their ability to fix things instead of highlighting their failures. I suggested. People work better when they're not terrified of making mistakes. Ridiculous, she declared, though her skin had lightened slightly from midnight to deep sapphire. Fear is an excellent motivator. It ensures attention to detail and prevents complacency. Fear also causes stress responses that impair cognitive function and decision-making, I pointed out, connecting my portable interface to her ship's systems. Your crew isn't incompetent, they're paralyzed by the fear of disappointing you. Chief Engineer Voss cleared his throat tentatively. Your Majesty, if I may, the human's neural pattern signature is remarkably stable. It might provide the harmonic anchor we need to reset the quantum substrate. Queen Valeria glanced between Voss and me, her expression suggesting she was weighing the relative merits of accepting human help versus drifting into a black hole. Fine, she said finally. But if this damages my ship further, I'm holding you personally responsible for the destruction of the Zephyrian flagship. Fair enough, I agreed, initiating the connection sequence. But if it works, maybe consider that there might be better ways to motivate people than creative threats about their competence. As the integration began, I felt the strange sensation of my thoughts briefly touching something vast and complex, the bioneural network that connected Queen Valeria to every system on her ship. For just a moment, I experienced what it was like to feel personally responsible for the safety of thousands of crew members, to carry the weight of an entire civilization's expectations, to rule through strength because showing weakness meant watching everything you protected fall apart. It was exhausting. Now, I said, monitoring the harmonic patterns as they began to stabilize, try thinking calm thoughts while I recalibrate the quantum resonance matrix. Calm thoughts, she repeated skeptically. While drifting toward certain death. Certainly. Any other impossible requests? Despite everything, the crisis, the deadline, the very real possibility that we were about to become the universe's most diplomatically awkward pancake, I found myself smiling. Just one, I said, looking up from my scanner to meet her burning gaze. You are so beautiful. The effect was immediate and absolutely devastating. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, as if the universe itself had paused to process what had just happened. Queen Valeria's crystalline skin underwent a transformation so rapid and dramatic that several crew members actually gasped audibly. The deep sapphire fury melted away like morning frost, replaced by a luminescent pearl shade that seemed to glow from within. Her pointed ears, which had been flattened against her skull in anger, snapped upright in what could only be described as shock. But it was her eyes that truly gave away her bewilderment. Those burning amber orbs that had been radiating royal displeasure suddenly went wide with something approaching panic, as if I'd just spoken in a language that shouldn't exist but somehow made perfect sense. You? She stammered, her usual commanding tone replaced by something small and uncertain. You think I am beautiful? The question emerged with such genuine confusion that I realized I'd accidentally stumbled onto something profound. Here was a queen who commanded through fear and intimidation, who ruled one of the most powerful empires in known space, and she was genuinely bewildered by a simple compliment. Yes, I said simply, continuing to work on the quantum harmonics while trying not to smile at her reaction. Even when you're furious enough to melt deck plating with your glare, you're absolutely beautiful. Her skin shifted through several shades of pearl and pale blue, settling on a soft luminescence that made her look like she was carved from living starlight. Chief Engineer Voss was staring at his queen with the expression of someone witnessing a natural phenomenon that defied known physics. But I was. She gestured vaguely at the bridge around us. I was shouting. At everyone. Very loudly. With significant threats regarding their continued employment and possibly their molecular cohesion. Yes, you were, I agreed, noting with satisfaction that the quantum substrate was finally stabilizing now that her emotional output had shifted. And you were magnificent while doing it. Terrifying, but magnificent. She attempted to regain her composure, straightening to her full imposing height and clearing her throat with royal authority. Yes, well, obviously the beauty of Zephyrian royalty is renowned throughout the galaxy, so your observation is hardly. The words trailed off as she seemed to realize what she was saying, and her skin shifted back to that vulnerable pearl shade. You really meant it, she said quietly. You were not attempting to manipulate or flatter for political advantage. I don't think anyone would choose right now as the optimal time for insincere flattery, I pointed out, gesturing at the tactical display still showing their deteriorating orbit. Generally speaking, when someone's ship is about to become intimately acquainted with a black hole, compliments tend to be either genuine or completely absent. A sound escaped her that might have been laughter if she wasn't still processing the concept of receiving an honest compliment. In 300 years of rule, no one has ever told me I was beautiful while I was angry. Usually they focus more on the not dying horribly aspect of our interactions. 300 years. I asked, then immediately felt stupid for being surprised. Zephyrian lifespans were legendary, and she was royalty besides. And no one's ever complimented you when you weren't being diplomatically pleasant? Diplomatic pleasantness is not exactly my forte, she admitted, watching the quantum harmonics display with fascination as the readings continued to improve. I find that clear expressions of displeasure tend to prevent future incidents of incompetence. Or, I suggested gently, they prevent people from taking initiative because they're too afraid of making mistakes to try anything new. Her ears twitched as she considered this. You believe fear is ineffective as a motivational tool? I think fear has its place, but it's a terrible foundation for leadership, I replied, making final adjustments to the harmonic matrix. People who are afraid to fail rarely achieve anything exceptional. They just try to avoid notice. The quantum drive gave a pleased hum as it came back online, filling the bridge with the subtle vibration that indicated healthy spacetime manipulation. Chief Engineer Voss let out a sigh of relief so profound it probably registered on seismic equipment. Your Majesty, he reported, his voice shaking slightly, quantum harmonics are stable. We have full power to the drive systems. Queen Valeria nodded regally, but I caught her glancing at me with an expression of curious bewilderment. Excellent. Plot a course away from the black hole and resume our original heading. As the bridge crew sprang into action with renewed efficiency, she moved closer to where I was disconnecting my equipment from her ship's systems. The harmonic stabilization worked because my emotional state regulated, she said quietly. Which happened because you stopped focusing on everything that was going wrong and started thinking about something else, I finished. Amazing what people can accomplish when they're not paralyzed by the fear of royal displeasure. She was quiet for a moment, watching her crew work with smooth professionalism now that the crisis had passed and their queen wasn't broadcasting volcanic fury through the bioneural network. You called me beautiful while I was behaving like a tyrant, she said finally. Why? I considered the question seriously. Because you were beautiful. Terrifying, yes, but also passionate and fierce and completely committed to protecting your people. That kind of dedication is always beautiful, even when it comes with threats of molecular dissolution. Her skin shifted through several shades of blue and pearl before settling on something that looked almost shy. I have been told many things in my 3 centuries of rule. Beautiful has not been among them. Formidable, yes. Intimidating, frequently. Beautiful. She seemed to test the word like an unfamiliar flavor. No one has ever used that word to describe my anger. Then they weren't paying attention, I said simply. The look she gave me was complex, surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been vulnerability quickly hidden behind royal composure. You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain Ryder. Probably both, I admitted. But I'm honest. For the first time since we'd boarded her ship, Queen Valeria smiled. Not the sharp, predatory expression she'd worn during her tirade, but something genuine and warm that transformed her entire face. Yes, she said softly. I believe you are. The restoration of the Astrolix's quantum drive turned out to be just the beginning of what would become the most unusual diplomatic mission of my career. Queen Valeria insisted that our ships travel together to the peace conference on Centauri Prime, officially for continued technical consultation, but really, I suspected, because she was curious about the human who had seen beauty in her fury. The next 3 days provided ample opportunity for that curiosity to develop into something more complex. It started with small things. Instead of commanding her crew through imperial decree and thinly veiled threats, she began asking for their input on technical decisions. When Chief Engineer Voss suggested an efficiency upgrade to the harmonic matrix, instead of questioning his competence, she actually listened to his explanation and approved the modification. Your crew seems more relaxed, I observed during one of our daily coordination meetings in her private study, a crystalline chamber that reflected her moods in subtle color shifts across the walls. They are working more efficiently, she admitted, though she sounded slightly bewildered by this development. Yesterday, Engineer Voss actually volunteered a suggestion for improving our sensor array. He has never volunteered anything before except apologies for existing. People are more creative when they're not spending half their mental energy on avoiding your displeasure, I pointed out, accepting the cup of Zephyrian tea she offered. The stuff was surprisingly good, like drinking liquid starlight with hints of exotic spices. But how do I maintain authority if I am not? She paused, searching for the right words. Intimidating. Leadership requires respect, and respect comes from demonstrating superior strength. Respect can also come from demonstrating superior wisdom, I suggested. Or from showing that you value your people's contributions. She considered this while the walls of her study shifted through shades of thoughtful blue-green. You lead through inspiration rather than intimidation. I try to. It doesn't always work, but people tend to follow you more willingly when they believe you're taking them somewhere worth going, rather than because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. Inspiration, she repeated, as if testing a new concept. And you believe this is more effective than ensuring compliance through superior force? I think force has its place, but it shouldn't be your first tool, I replied. Fear might get people to follow orders, but it won't get them to think creatively or take initiative when you're not around to give those orders. Over the following days, I watched her experiment with this concept. She began complimenting efficient work instead of only commenting on failures. When a junior officer made a minor mistake in navigation calculations, instead of a lecture about incompetence, she provided gentle correction and encouragement to be more careful. The transformation was remarkable. Her crew, freed from the constant fear of royal displeasure, began demonstrating the kind of innovation and dedication that had made the Zephyrian Empire a galactic power in the first place. It is strange, she confided during one of our evening conversations, to discover that people work better when they are not terrified of disappointing me. 3 centuries of rule, and I never considered that fear might be limiting their effectiveness. Leadership is complicated, I agreed. And most of us figure it out through trial and error. The fact that you're willing to try new approaches says good things about your judgment. Her skin brightened to a warm golden shade that I was beginning to recognize as pleasure. You continue to surprise me, Captain Ryder. Most people who meet me seem to expect either submission or hostility. You offer neither. I offer honesty and respect, I said. Both of which you've earned. Even when I was threatening to space your diplomatic mission for suggesting that human technology might be useful. Especially then, I replied with a smile. Passion in defense of your people is admirable, even when it comes with creative threats about vacuum exposure. She laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. You find very strange things admirable, Alex Ryder. It wasn't until she used my first name that I realized how much had changed between us. The fierce queen who had terrified her own crew was learning to lead through inspiration, and somehow I had become someone she trusted enough to let her guard down around. You know, I said, watching the walls of her study shift to warm amber in response to her mood, you're even more beautiful when you're happy than when you're furious. The effect was immediate. Her skin shifted through several shades of pearl and rose gold before settling on something that looked almost shy. You continue to use that word. Beautiful. Even now that you have seen me at my worst. I've seen you at your most fearsome, I corrected. That's not the same as your worst. Your worst would be if you stopped caring about your people's welfare. She was quiet for a long moment, absently running her fingers along the crystalline surface of her desk. In 300 years, no one has ever suggested that my anger came from caring too much rather than from enjoying the exercise of power. Maybe they were too intimidated to look past the surface, I suggested. Or maybe they assumed that royal anger must be about maintaining dominance rather than protecting people. And you assume differently because I watched you during the crisis. You weren't angry about looking bad in front of allies or losing face diplomatically. You were terrified that your people might die because of a system failure, and anger was the only way you knew how to channel that terror into action. Her ears twitched as she processed this. You saw fear beneath the fury. I saw someone who cares deeply about her responsibilities and had never learned healthier ways to express that caring. The walls of her study had gone completely transparent now, offering a view of the star field beyond as our ships traveled toward Centauri Prime. In the distance, I could see the lights of the Meridian keeping pace with the Astrolux, two very different vessels traveling together toward an uncertain future. "The peace conference will be interesting," she said eventually. "The other delegations expect Queen Valeria the Terrifying, ruler through strength and intimidation. They may be surprised by recent developments." "Change is often surprising," I agreed. "But sometimes it's necessary." She turned to face me fully, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight from beyond the transparent walls. "Alex Ryder," she said formally, "would you consider remaining as a permanent cultural liaison between our peoples? The Zephyrian Empire would benefit from continued exposure to human perspectives on leadership and diplomacy." "That's a very generous offer, Your Majesty." "Valeria," she corrected softly. "When we are alone, I would prefer you use my name." "Valeria," I repeated, enjoying the way the syllables felt. "That's a beautiful name." Her skin shifted to rose gold again, and I realized that I was falling for a queen who commanded one of the most powerful empires in known space and who was just learning that she could be valued for who she was rather than how effectively she could intimidate people. "The offer stands," she said quietly. "Cultural liaison, diplomatic advisor, or—" She paused, her skin shifting through several shades of uncertainty. "Or—" I prompted gently. "Or whatever you would like to be," she finished, meeting my eyes with an expression that was both hopeful and vulnerable. "I find that I would very much like to continue learning how to see myself through your eyes." I looked at this magnificent woman who was discovering that she could lead through inspiration rather than fear, who was brave enough to change centuries of ingrained behavior because she believed it would better serve her people, and who had somehow become someone I couldn't imagine saying goodbye to. "I'd like that too," I said simply. Her smile could have powered a small star system. As our ships approached Centauri Prime and the peace conference that would determine the future of several civilizations, I reflected on the strange turns that life could take. A week ago, I'd been a diplomatic captain dealing with routine territorial disputes. Now I was apparently the cultural liaison to a queen who was revolutionizing her approach to leadership, and possibly something more personal than that. The conference would be interesting indeed. But somehow, I was looking forward to watching Valeria surprise a galaxy that thought they knew what Zephyrian leadership looked like. After all, she was still fierce, still formidable, and still absolutely beautiful. She'd just learned that she could be all of those things without terrifying everyone around her. The universe, I decided, was about to become a much more interesting place.